Good evening, good morning, salutations, YouTube. So, I recently read Essex Dogs by Dan Jones, and it gave me an idea for a video. Besides, I'm going to talk about that book in a future video. I took some notes and stuff on it, so I'm going to come back and do a sort of review. I don't really like calling it what I do a review, but it's more just like a discussion. But anyway, at the end of Essex Dogs, Dan Jones cites a dinner he had with George R. R. Martin that helped give him some ideas for the book. Not that George R. R. Martin gave him ideas, but just that it sort of inspired him, and he cited George R. R. Martin as a bit of an idol of his, or someone he wants to be like, or somebody he likes at least, right? And it gave me some ideas. I like George R. R. Martin a lot. I really like A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones a lot. I've read the series multiple times, and just for reference, my favorite one of the series is Feast for Crows. So, I think a lot of people's favorites Feast. But, anyways, there's a lot of interviews out there and on George R. R. Martin's blogs and just a lot of stuff of him talking about how he likes history. And then, so he's talked about history quite a bit. Specifically, he's referred to the Plantagenet dynasty and the 100 Years' War. Obviously, if you've read the book and have done any kind of background research on his series, it's pretty obvious he's taken a lot of cues from history, and he's done a fairly good job of it, I think. Obviously, one of the biggest ones is the War of the Roses, but he takes a lot of stuff from history. The whole Khal Drogo giving some pouring molten gold on somebody, that's directly from history. That's a historical event that actually happened, at least one that people say happens. So, but he does a lot of stuff like that. Obviously, the whole and then Westeros and Essos is a play on Wessex and Essex. So, and obviously the whole Seven Kingdoms of Westeros. It's all a play on England and the kingdoms of England, and the north being Scotland, and beyond the wall really is more like Scotland, and the north is sort of like Northumbria, Ireland, or whatever. But anyway. The point is it's analogous with actual history and geography, and he does a fairly good job of it. But so it gave me an idea to do what I think would be good, good recommendations for somebody who likes Game of Thrones. I like Game of Thrones a lot. I'm not as into fantasy as I used to be. I'll still read it here and there, particularly if I'm interested in an author. But so this would kind of be my spin on it, which is going to be a lot of historical fiction, although there is non-historical fiction in here. I apologize. Let me reach down here real quick. And I'll start with just a couple honorable mentions. Obviously, there's obvious stuff. A big one right here is Dune. This isn't going to be on my list just yet. I apologize for the glare there. If you've never read Dune, read it. It's not on the list that I made, but Dune is fantastic. And it's pretty obvious. George R. R. Martin read Dune, loved Dune, probably read it more than once. Here's another honorable mention. I'm gonna give Con Ingledon an honorable mention, and it's not his War of the Roses series, although that is good too, and you should read that if you're interested in it. But this is Genghis, Birth of an Empire. Con Ingledon has a whole series. It's like 4 books, maybe it's 5, of Genghis Khan. I read it several years ago, and I loved it. I thought it was really great. It's my favorite work by Con Ingledon. The first one is Genghis Khan uniting the Mongol tribes. Before they go and start and create the Mongol Empire. It's fantastic. Read it. I think it's his best stuff. I got a couple other honorable mentions here. This is a single book. There's a couple authors that are going to pop up here a few times, right? This is Agincourt by Bernard Cornwell. It's a one-off book, and it's just about the Battle of Agincourt. It's really great. Check it out. There's actually, if you look at the bottom there's a blurb by George R. R. Martin. And then they put that on a lot of Bernard Cornwell books, but it says about Bernard Cornwell being one of the best at writing battle scenes and writing battles. There's a couple other honorable mentions I got here. Here's another one, which is the Marsh. This is the Mars trilogy by Edgar Rice Burroughs. This is John Carter of Mars. So this. It's just the John Carter series, and the first 3 are really great. Definitely check this out. It's like a Sword and Plan. It's kind of like Sword and Sorcery almost, except it's a slightly different. It's really pulpy. It's really great. Great action adventure. Definitely check this out if you've never read this. apologize. Let me scoot my books a little bit closer here. Here's another one. This is just honorable mentions. So this is stuff that just like some of these are like sort of adjacent, not exactly historical, not really that medieval era, which was kind of what I was going for here. But this is the Count of Monte Cristo. If you've never read this, definitely check this out. It takes place during the Napoleonic era, but it's just an epic, revenge story, and the parts where the main characters are in prison. It's just great, man. This is just a fantastic book. It's one of my favorites ever. I'm going to do a full video on this soon. All my favorite books I'm going to. Another one I'm going to show you guys right here. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. If you've never read War and Peace, definitely check this out. Yeah, it's a big book. Napoleonic era. It's a Napoleon. There's sort of two stories. That's why it's called War and Peace. But it's about the Napoleon's invasion of Russia, and it's just really great. It's really epic. This is my favorite book ever. Definitely check it out. I'm gonna do a full video on this soon too. Now we'll get into what's actually on my list here. And the very first one I got, and this is another one that's a little bit borderline about how much is it, how close related is it to Game of Thrones. So this is the Three Musketeers. And you might think like, oh, this is not really medieval, and it's not, right? This is more like 1600s. But there's a lot of sword fighting in here. D'Artagnan's a great character. And one of the great parts about this book, because it was serialized, there's story arcs within the book, within the book, multiple times, ups and downs, and you could stop this, at certain places, at certain chapters, and come back to it later, at the end of a story arc and go back. It's really great. Three Musketeers is fantastic, and not enough people talk about this book. Please read this. You can see my copy. I've had this one forever. I've read this so many times. This used to be one of my favorite books as a kid. One of the very first adult books I ever read from cover to cover, and I'll be reading it the rest of my life. So I need to get a new copy for this one falls apart. So the next one I got on my list here is, so this is another work by Dan Jones. I'm going to put both of these together. This is War of the Roses by Dan Jones. This is nonfiction. But I think Dan Jones, and then this is The Plantagenets by Dan Jones. I've read both of these recently. If you know anything about the War of the Roses, it doesn't really read like a normal story. There's no through line. There's no characters I really root for. It's not like Game of Thrones, right? Like the Yorks are sort of like this, and George R. R. Martin kind of flip flops them, right? The Lannisters and the Yorks. So the Lancasters and the Yorks are the real history. And then there's the Lannisters and the Starks. So obviously you can see the play on the names there. But the Yorks are sort of the bad guys in War of the Roses, but it's not really good or bad. It's just people with different opinions on how the kingdom should be run. But I think Dan Jones does a pretty good job, even though there's not really a through narrative. Like there's not a singular character you can follow. By the time Henry Tudor becomes king, like you don't even really know who that is. He's been in exile for years by the time he actually becomes king. So anyway, but it's really great. It's a really fascinating piece of history, and I highly recommend reading both of these. The Plantagenets is more about the dynasty in itself, which is all the great 100-Year War stuff. Really fascinating era of history. So definitely check that out. The next one I got here is also a work by Dan Jones, but I made it separate. And I just read this recently, and this is Essex Dogs by Dan Jones. This is actually a trilogy. I'm going to jump out on a limb here and go ahead and recommend the whole trilogy. I haven't read the whole trilogy yet. I've only read the first one, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to make a video about this book. But Essex Dogs, it's about the Cressy campaign and the King Edward III and the Black Prince invasion of France, specifically Normandy. But yes, and it's there's some good maps in the book, and it shows their march and they're going through France, right? And they're going through all these different towns and pillaging and whatever other not good things they do there. But anyway, it's really great. It's a really great read. Really good at kind of giving you the feel of what it might have been like to be involved in something like that, right? To be in that invasion force. Anyway, so I'm going to go on to the next one here. And this is another one I'll jump out on a bit of a limb for. This is The Half-Drowned King This is really great. I read this. Steve Donahue has recommended this quite a few times on his channel. That's why I gave it a try. I haven't read all three of them. I've only read this first one. This is a Viking Age book, and it's kind of an interesting twist on it. It's in Norway, right? The main story is in Norway. It's about it's like the petty kingdom era of Norway, and it's really fascinating. I thought this was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna continue the series. I don't know when I'll get back to it, but I'm gonna continue it. So I really like this a lot. So if Steve Donahue ever sees this, thank you for recommending this. Another one here. So this one would be a little bit different. This is Wolf Hall. Wolf Hall is the story of Henry VIII. Henry VIII is the king who had all the wives and the divorces and kind of brought Protestantism to England. So Wolf Hall but it's told through the lens of Thomas Cromwell. Thomas Cromwell was basically he's like Henry VIII's leg. He's like a lawyer, but he's kind of like a leg breaker and a fixer, right? A sort of vague, kind of do it all sort of guy. Go get the job done. But Wolf Hall, it's not really a bunch of action, but it's a great political thriller and just a fascinating read. I really love this book a lot. I read all three of them. So that includes Bring Up the Bodies and The Mirror and the Light, which are both fantastic. Wolf Hall, especially, though, is really great. All three of them are great. Check out the whole series, but definitely read Wolf Hall. So the next one I got here, so I just did Wolf Hall. This is a good one. So this, if you look here, this has a blurb from George R. R. Martin on it. This is the Accursed Kings series. This first one's called The Iron King in English. But that first one, if you can't read that up there, it says it's a blurb by George R. R. Martin. It says, this is the original Game of Thrones. So this is a 7-book series. None of them are very big. They're all 350, 400 pages. So some are less than that. Some are right around 300. And this is like just a multi-generational story of the 100 Years' War. This first one starts with Philip the Fair. This is a fantastic read. And I read it because after I read Game of Thrones, I had saw that, I had seen that George R. R. Martin had recommended this series, and I read it, and I loved the first one so much I just read the whole series, all consecutive. And this is a fantastic series. I'm going to do a video on this. I never see anybody talk about this series on BookTube, and it deserves to be talked about. I've never read any other work by Maurice Durand, although he's wrote other things, but definitely check this out if you've never read it. This is great. I actually read this first one in French too, because that's my other hobby, is learning languages, and specifically French is my favorite. But anyway, this is just a fantastic read. The first one starts with, it's been a while since I read it. There are some priests that I believe are, there's something different. There's something to do with religion, and the priests are being executed. They're burned at the stake, and they curse Philip the Fair and his family for generations. And it just shows, now obviously there's no magic in this book, you know what I mean? It's not a fantasy story, but a lot of bad stuff happens to this family, and it kind of makes you believe maybe the curse was real. So definitely check this out. If you've never read the Accursed Kings series, read this. I wish people talked about this more. This definitely deserves to be remembered, and I'm so glad I saw that. I read this back in like 2014. I've read it again since. I think the last time I read it was in like maybe it was like 2019 I read it again, but I'm due for a reread. I'm going to read this again. I love this series, so it's fantastic. So this next one, this will be a little bit different too. This is Shogun. This is one of my favorite books ever. Definitely in my top 10, maybe my top 5. I read Shogun for the first time in like 2011 or something. It's what inspired me to learn languages, because in this book the main character is a polyglot, and once he gets to Japan, it's a Dutch merchant vessel, but the pilot of the ship and their navigator is an Englishman. He speaks English, but he can also speak Dutch and Spanish and Portuguese. And I believe they're trying to get through the Magellan Pass, which is in South America, but something happens. They get caught by another boat, another ship, another Portuguese ship, or maybe it's from the Spanish Empire. And so they have to escape, and then they just go that direction towards Japan. And by the time they get there, they are destitute and just half starved, and a lot of them have scurvy, and so when they basically crash land in Japan, and this guy, it's like basically going to an alien world, and at this time, even though muskets exist and guns exist, Japan is been sort of very isolated from the rest of the world, and it's still feudal Japan. So there's samurai, and samurais are sort of basically like nicer nobility, and this is just a phenomenal story. And the musketry itself plays a role in the story because there are some samurai on one side that are trying to use them. Like they were, well, if this stuff exists, we should use it and see if we can win more battles. So this is a great story. I promise you, if you read Shogun, you will enjoy this. I've read quite a bit of James Clavell books, and this is his best work. His other books are good too, but nothing like this Shogun. This is a classic in my opinion. I think it's fantastic. I love this book. This is gonna be in my library for the rest of my life, and I will always continue to reread this. And this is one of the authors I said would be on here a few times, Dan Jones and Bernard Cornwell. So this is The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell. There's 13 books in this series, I believe. And this is, if you've seen the TV shows called The Last Kingdom, the series itself is called The Saxon Stories, but this is Uhtred, son of Uhtred, right? Uhtred of Bebbanburg. So he's a Saxon, but he is kidnapped at an early age, or at least taken by the Danes, and raised with Danes. So he has a bit of an identity crisis thing going on. But the main through line of the whole series is he's trying to get Bebbanburg back, right? His birthright. It's taken from him by his uncle, and it's just a fantastic series. Bernard Cornwell, he's not some literary master, right? These aren't literary masterpieces, but these are good, fun action adventure stories. If you like fantasy, this will be right up your alley. Like, this is a great series. I really love this. It's among my favorites. A couple years ago, I would have said it was my favorite series ever. I've changed my mind on that recently, but that only because it's because I have come to the conclusion that the Bernard Cornwell Sharpe series, or Richard Sharpe series, which is during the Napoleonic Wars, is my favorite series of all time. But this is very close, and I will continue to reread these for the rest of my life too, because Bernard Cornwell is my favorite author. So, and that's never going to change. So, but this is a great series, man. Definitely check this out. And the first 4 books, especially, I mean, the whole series is great. But the first 3 or 4 books have subplots that run through all of them. It's fantastic. Check this out. A lot of great fight scenes. Viking Age, if I didn't say that. So of course Vikings, right? Doesn't get much better than that. So here's another one. This is among my favorite books ever too. This is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. I think if you read this book, it'll be pretty obvious that George R.R. Martin was influenced by this book, that he had read this, and I think it stuck with him. And that's okay, right? That's normal. Authors, they read books. There's stuff that they really like a lot. And I think this would be one of those books for George R.R. Martin, right? This is like in the 1100s, and the premise of it is that they are building this cathedral, and you might think, oh, building a cathedral, what's so interesting? What about, that's boring, right? Well, I don't care about that. But just a bunch of craziness goes on while they're trying to build this. It's a miracle it even happened, and that is honestly, that is probably, I'm sure that is actually the case, that it took a miracle to get these things built, right? For the glory of God. That's why they're doing it. And massive amounts of gold and money are put into this thing to get this thing built. This is just a fantastic story. There's a lot of subverting expectations in this, which is one of the reasons why it really makes me think of George R.R. Martin a lot. I think there's a quote out there of George R.R. Martin talking about this book. And despite it being about cathedrals, there's a lot of violence in this. There's a lot of, fighting, and it's just an epic story. There's a generational element to it. Definitely check out Pillars of the Earth if you've never read it. And then this will be the last one here. This is The Winter King by Bernard Cornwell. This is his Warlord Chronicles. This is Bernard Cornwell's take on the King Arthur mythos. It's a little bit different than most King Arthur stories, because this actually takes place in what we would, it's not really called the Dark Ages anymore. It's more, but I'll just call it the Dark Ages just for simplicity's sake. But this is like a realistic take on like what it might have actually been like, with Dark Age weapons, and armor, It's just Dark Age England, and it's basically about the Saxon invasion of England. For those of you that don't know, it's the Angles and Saxons and Jutes invaded England when the Brythonic people, the British people, were already there, right? And it's just about the Angles, the Angles and the Saxons coming there. And they, at this point, when this book starts, they're already there. They're already occupying, a large portion of like modern day Kent, and Essex, and East Anglia, in England. And it's just really interesting, man. It's just a fantastic story. I love this take on King Arthur. This is, if I would cheat a little bit, I'd make all three. That's 3 books. It's a trilogy, and I would count it as one. I'd put this in my top 5 favorite books of all time. I really love this series. I just reread it for the second time, and it was as good as I read it the first time. Again, is it a literary masterpiece? Probably not, but it's fantastic. I really love this a lot. It's a lot of fun. It's quite popular in the fantasy community, so if you haven't read this, check this out. A lot of people claim there is magical elements in it, but most of it can be chalked up to circumstance and luck, and that's probably where I would put it, but, with all the magical elements in it. But irregardless, read this. Read the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. It's fantastic. You really can't go wrong with this. It's only 3 books, right? You don't got much to lose. I'm gonna put one more in here. I don't got this on my list, but I got one of his books right here, and I love the covers of these Sharp novels. I wish I could collect all of them with these covers. This is the Sharp series by Bernard Cornwell. Not really no kind of fantasy element. It's not even medieval. It's during the Napoleonic Wars, but it follows a character named Richard Sharp. It's just a great series. A lot of action and adventure. Really fun. A little historical element to it. Just check it out. That's not on the list. Number 1 was the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. But anyway, those are just some recommendations for you guys out there if you like, Game of Thrones. Obviously, I could have put Lord of the Rings on here, but everyone knows Lord of the Rings. And honestly, I probably didn't even need to mention Dune, but I felt like I had to mention those books, and I love those books too. But I really wanted. I was just putting my take on it, which is a lot of historical fiction. That's what I like. I like history, and I like nonfiction a lot. So, but I think you would like all that stuff I just recommended. And then I apologize for having to reach down and stuff. I should have put maybe a little pedestal right here or something that I could have more easily shown you guys the book. So I'm sorry for that, but I hope you guys enjoyed it anyway. Anyway, that's all for today, YouTube. Good night, everybody, wherever you're at.